and I'm glad you guys are doing it, and I'm doing easier stuff. We're going to jump back into the Internet of Things and talk about how it evolved from the early years at the beginning of this century, how important it is, and how can organisations create value through the Internet of Things. I guess this is a different perspective, but it's a perspective from two speakers from Fujitsu. The session has a provocative title of Internet of Things, Gold Rush or Ghost Train. So to present it, please welcome the GM of IoT and Edgeware at Fujitsu, Craig Carter, and with Craig, the Principal Advisor on Technology and Innovation at Fujitsu, Steve Lennon. Make him welcome.
Yeah, so the idea is just to see whether this is the Gold Rush IDC and Gartner tell us it may be, or a ghost train we should all avoid because it's just too scary a ride. I get to work with our labs in Japan and our cutting-edge business units in Japan too, to help bring some of that technology across here to our customers in Australia and New Zealand, and then work with Craig's team to actually deliver those projects. And in Fujitsu, at some times of the day, you might hear us referred to as Thing 1 and Thing 2, but that's a thing I'd rather you forget for a moment. So we know that, to use a very Australian analogy, that we've got these huge waves of technology piling up upon us. And in your businesses, no doubt you've taken that first wave, the internet of information, if you like, and been able to use that to drive growth and cut costs in your business. Not all of us have taken full advantage of the mobile internet and pushed our business onto the smartphones we all carry around to the greatest extent we possibly can. And before we finish that job, now the Internet of Things is upon us. And pretty soon behind, we're seeing artificial intelligence, robotics, and blockchain, which some people are now referring to as the Internet of Value, because we can take authentic value now and exchange it and transmit it online. And at one stage here, without torturing the analogy too far, you've got to decide which wave you're actually going to catch. Otherwise, it's quite possible you might end up as dust to dust, ashes to ashes, as a company that doesn't quite make the next wave of technology. So the Internet of Things fits in here. We've all talked about it during the course of the day. I like to think about it as a fairly simple process of getting information from things to a decision maker that can either act upon it in real time or in hindsight after some analytic work has been done. And of course, that decision maker, while it's depicted as a person there for the moment, may well be an algorithm or soon a robot or artificial intelligence. But one way or the other, before you start doing any work on the Internet of Things at the type of technical detail that Leon took us through from a 5G point of view, the most important thing is to map the information flow. And how you get information from a thing like this, for example, and get it to a decision maker to act upon. And what the Internet of Things is doing is two things. One is to create the possibility of intelligent organisations. Let's face it, in the past, most of our large organisations have actually been quite dumb. They've been entirely reliant upon the intellectual capacity of us as human beings. But the Internet of Things is now giving organisations a sense of touch and smell, the ability to hear and see stuff, and now with those algorithms and artificial intelligence to also begin to develop a capacity for decision-making, intelligence. And the other thing it's doing with, like a light bulb or a turbine blade in a jet engine, it's making things all a bit like IKEA furniture. Each of them will have multiple purposes. So a light bulb will still be a light bulb, but it will also be a motion sensor to detect a thief in your house when you're on holiday. The turbine blade will still help drive the jet engine, but it will also be able to help us detect in advance any possible fault in that engine and determine when we need to take it out of service. So, and Craig will also share a story with you about the humble power pole and the additional functions we can give a power pole with the Internet of Things. So that's a definition. The fact is, as I mentioned, those fourth wave technologies, as Peter Diamandis would talk about, They're kind of exponential technologies that are all crashing upon us at the same time. So very quickly we're seeing with the Internet of Things that we need to consider adjacent technologies like robotics, AI, blockchain and so on. And so it's not a term that I would say is the only thing we need to be worried about. We also need to be thinking about these additional technologies coming through very quickly that do have the capacity to multiply the business value we can generate through IoT. And Craig will talk a little bit about some of those use cases with you. I've never worked with such a big screen in my entire life. But I can share a personal story here in the context of why IoT is exploding upon us now, in the massive reduction in the cost of sensors, in the cost of bandwidth, in the cost of computing capacity, and in the context of actually getting any particular technology company or technology off the ground. The cost of doing that has crashed. And back in 2006, with a couple of friends in the creative industry, we built a user-generated content startup that was called SuperVirals. If I said that to you today, you'd probably all say that name sucks and we should never have gone ahead and launched the business, but we did. We raised nearly $1 million and we lost every penny of it in the next 2 years because a thing called YouTube came from around the corner and made the platform we created redundant, even though the particular use case of getting people to create content for you and then show that content during the course of the Super Bowl or whatever for Doritos is now commonplace. But the cost of building technology companies is, I'm sure, we could do what we did back then in 2006 for about $500 today. And that's enabling startup companies and grown-up companies like Fujitsu and Huawei to get together and create stuff that we can do quite quickly. And that's hopefully what we'll be able to do in the coming months. So IoT represents a fantastic opportunity to remedy some of the very poor ways in which we use the world's resources. And here you can see whether they happen to be cars, which are parked 92% of the time in Europe, and I'm sure not too different here. Even fertilizer applied to our fields, which 70% of which isn't taken up by crops and ends up back in the atmosphere as greenhouse gases. Enormous amounts of food wasted in the food supply chain as well as in the restaurant front end of the food supply chain to you. And accidents that occur. Still 1/3 of deaths on the road in Australia are pedestrians. So we've got lots of ways in which we very poorly use the world's resources. And in the first flush of use cases of IoT, we see it will all be about productivity and efficiency and the capacity to use those resources better. And Craig will then take you on to some of the use cases that go beyond that. I'm going to have to put this thing down soon, won't I? There are challenges and issues that we'll need to confront, security and privacy foremost among them, and we've talked about that quite a bit today. We see most of these challenges as quite doable and challenges that we can overcome. And what I'll now do is get out of the way and allow Craig to take you through some of the business value that we can create with this new technology. No trouble.
Good afternoon. My name is Craig Cutter. I look after IoT for Fujitsu in Oceania. What I'd like to do over the next 15 minutes or so is to focus on business value. We've heard a lot of potential words and lots of numbers from lots of people, but are there any profitable business cases out there for IoT? And I'd like to focus on how we create value, what are some of the issues in delivering IoT solutions, where do they come from, and profitable use cases. First of all, I'd like just to step back and just have a look, or just a brief understanding of what IoT is all about and where the business value actually comes from. As many people have spoken about, IoT is obviously connecting sensors to things, people, networks, machines, and obviously using that intelligent data to be able to create business value. Another way of looking at it is the connection of two worlds. An IT world, or a digital world, and an operational and a physical world. And that's where the business value is created. How have we done this in the past? Well, and it's actually even happening today, there's a lot of manual processes around today. You can think of obviously a lot of inaccuracies that come through that. and also the time that it takes to actually do manual processing. In the 70s and 80s, we looked at putting barcodes on assets to try and track them, and it certainly did improve the accuracy of getting information. But barcodes themselves don't tell us about the environment of the asset, what the asset is actually doing. And of course today there's lots of tags and sensors out there that measure temperature, humidity, pressure, vibration, GPS, lots of different things that can be actually monitored in real time. And of course the collection of this data in the connected world brings obviously the Internet of Things to real life. So where are we going to see solutions today in the IoT world? Where I think that there's 4 areas of potential. The first one of these is productivity type solutions, reduction in time and improvement in accuracy of data. Preventative type solutions, preventive maintenance is a very good example, and predictive type solutions. Everybody's heard of big data and obviously the insights that you get to data, and new business models. And this is the interesting part of IoT, how new businesses can create new revenue streams or even disrupt other industries out there. So, why today? Well, as been mentioned before, the costs of sensors and devices out there have gone down dramatically. What we thought of at $25 for a sensor a couple of years ago is now under $1. Also, bandwidth costs have reduced quite considerably. Connectivity, in terms of bringing the information up from these sensors, has changed completely. You now have NFC, Wi-Fi, but you've also got all of these different other ways and networks out there, narrowband LTE, for example, from Huawei, that are starting to bring together easier ways to bring this information up into the enterprise layer. Also, edge processing. You can imagine the amount of data that you actually collect. Now there's a lot of work, like companies like Intel, of trying to do the processing as close to the source as possible. And integration. There are now IoT platforms, middleware platforms that can seamlessly bring this information up to the enterprise layer and the IT layer and the digital world. Of course, we still have some problems out there with IoT. Digital transformation is a big topic, and it's been talked about previously with other speakers. Security and privacy concerns, especially if the asset is a patient, for example. And as Steve mentioned, blockchain may be a solution for these type of areas. IT and OT divide. You can imagine these two worlds, IT and OT, have been separated for a long period of time. How CDOs, CIOs, operations, business work together will be very interesting to watch over the next couple of years. But lastly, and I think that we forget sometimes in IT or ICT, is the people that actually use these IoT solutions. There's a good example of a hospital that will remain nameless in Australia that rolled out an asset tracking system, an IoT solution to track beds. It was never turned on. And the major reason why it wasn't turned on was because they didn't put enough effort into trying to educate the stakeholders. In this particular case, it's with the nurses that thought that they were being tracked and the system was never turned on. So we've always got to be mindful of obviously the people using this. So, some solutions out there, some profitable solutions. And the first one I'd like to talk about is retail. And I'm sure you, like I, have gone into a store at some particular point, asked for a thing or a good that isn't the right colour or the right size, and you go up to the shop assistant, and the shop assistant says, well, if it isn't out there, we don't have it. And you ask kindly, well, could you go out the back and have a look at if it's out the back? They come back 5 to 10 minutes later, no, we don't have it. Well, could you ring up another store and see if it's in another store? Oh, I can't do that, you'll have to go and visit the store. Optimisation of inventory through the supply chain, through the back of house and front of house stores, retail stores especially, has been a major problem for many, many years. But now with sensor technology, in this particular case it was RFID sensors, you can put it on clothing and you can actually monitor all of your inventory through your supply chain to your customer. And 2 examples. And this is a number of companies out there. I think Walmart is the first one to start to use RFID technology. but Macy's and Lululemon. Macy's have started the process of RFID in all of their inventory, and they've saved up to $1 billion, yes, $1 billion in inventory savings. Lululemon, they wanted to move to an omni-channel or an online strategy business, and they didn't have the accuracy in their stores to understand what was going in and out of the stores. And now with RFID technology, they've got 98% accuracy rates. They can actually do audits every single day across all of their stores to determine what's in there. So 2 examples of profitable return on investment. Next one. Public safety and public safety around hospitals, around emergency services, around police. A lot of the time they have to check the inventory or assets within the vehicles before they change over or they go out to site. In this particular case, Richardson Police have had about 20 or 30 patrol cars. They were spending upwards of 20 minutes per day just checking the assets before they were going out to site. Now, by putting RFID technology in the car itself, they can do that within minutes. Plus also the added advantage is that they can actually look at where the inventory goes, where the assets go, and see if it's been maintained properly. Very quick, simple solution with a positive return on investment of less than 12 months. Hospitals. It's amazing how many assets move through a hospital, including patients. And because of this, lots of things go missing, and in fact, in hospitals, even in Sydney today, hospitals actually employ people 100% of their time just to look for stuff. And security is a major problem within hospitals. And now a lot of hospitals around the world are starting to tag all of their high-value assets and even low-value assets, including lab samples, pharmaceutical products, in order to, again, monitor all the inventory, the workflow through hospitals. And there's very clear examples of positive return on investment from these implementations. So what I'd like to do now is just talk to you, and those were, by the way, examples of productivity and preventative type solutions. What I'd like to do is give you an example which takes into account predictive and new business models. And it concerns power poles, something as bland as power poles. And an energy company came to see us recently and said, look, we've got 500,000 power poles out there. About 1% each year we have to replace because of wet rot. Can you come up with some innovative solutions? So what we did was we held a design thinking workshop and we came up with these solutions. First one, productivity. Very simple. You can imagine these power poles being out there for 60, 70 years. They've got fairly basic maintenance records, and it's very time-consuming going out and monitoring these things. Put an RFID tag on the power pole that contains the information about what's happened last, maintenance records, things like that. Very simple, obviously saving in time and accuracy improvements. Next thing, well, the person still has to go out. Maybe we obviously optimise the number of times that they have to go out or check the RFID tags. And there now exist today drones with RFID readers or even transmitters like narrowband LTE that could transmit that information back to a central site. Again, very good improvements in terms of time. Well, if you combine it with now technology on the tag side, and tags actually exist today that monitor wet rot, humidity, you can actually put these on power poles, and then with obviously the drones or with transmitters, you can then see that you can get information that you could obviously use for preventative type maintenance solutions. You could also combine this with analytics, and over time you could see where obviously wet rot has actually approached, and then obviously change the way that you monitor the power poles. But we thought, okay, that's a productivity, preventative, predictive type solution. What if we thought about the power pole as an asset itself, where we could actually sell information? What if you put other types of tags on the power pole? Things that could measure CO2, humidity, light, air quality, and sell that information to councils or to whomever. And And one of the ideas that we came up with is firefighting data. What if you put a temperature tag on there, and these temperature tags can last to very high temperature ranges, and then in real time be able to provide that information to firefighters. That may be better than having satellites information. And now also there's tags out there that can monitor between power poles, and if there's an incident in terms of the falling over or whatever, you could reroute and power mesh the grid. So something as simple as a power pole we've now looked at, and all of this was done within 1 day of design thinking. So you can imagine if you, in your own business, if you thought of the products that you sell, how you could possibly change the game. Of course, we can't do this by ourselves. Fujitsu has a number of partners out there in the IoT ecosystem we've put together over a number of years, and we've worked very closely with Huawei, and we're looking forward to obviously implementing some of the narrowband LTE solutions that they're currently working on. But collaboration with partners is not the only thing that we need with IoT solutions. And I'll hand it back to Thing One, who will talk to you about other things with collaboration. Thank you.
I'm just realising too that in hindsight we could probably take the data we've captured from the power poles about the progress of the fire front and use some analytics afterwards to model and understand the actual behaviour of the fire too, if indeed the tags can cope with that extreme temperature. So those of you in the audience, do you have senior managers at your company? I imagine you've all got some somewhere. And one of the things we need to do, because this technology is making things we've never imagined possible, and the world is changing at a rate that we literally can't imagine. Those of us who've been around for 2 and 3 decades are going to find in the next 5 years we'll see just as much change occur as has happened in the 30 years, sadly, that I've been in business. And so one of the things we need to do is begin to think differently and challenge our thinking about what's possible. And design thinking is something that we've been working in partnership with our Fujitsu design group out of Japan to implement in our Australian and New Zealand business. And it's a fantastic antidote to the athletic thinking that very senior managers tend to be really good at. That is, when you give them a question, they'll fire you back an answer instantaneously that is obviously totally correct and not subject often to further discussion. So that kind of I've seen that before, you know, we're all pattern recognition beings. Those senior people honestly believe the answer they've served up to you again is still correct. But it's very likely that looking into the world we're facing into, that many of the assumptions and the experience upon which that answer is based are about to be invalidated. So we need to have much more respect for the kind of problems we're solving, take much more of an adventurous style of approach. And if you've ever tried to climb Kilimanjaro or do an expedition down in the Antarctic or something else like that, you'll understand it's all about thinking about the risks and contingencies and all of the various outcomes we might encounter. And that's part of what the design thinking approach is uniquely suited for, and we've had some great success so far working with early customers trying to imagine what the world of IoT can open up and how we might use it to create business value. The second thing that we've learned is that this is all about creating that ecosystem, as Craig talked about. This is not a swim lane individual sport, faux teamwork, if you like, where it looks like we've all got the same t-shirt or bathers on, but in fact we're in our own silos or swim lanes. This is about working together, and we're hoping, for example, in a short while to start putting together industry collaborations under the banner of the IoT Alliance Australia that Catherine mentioned, where we can club together with universities, local councils, people like Fujitsu, Huawei, Downer, other customers we might work with, and establish these early stage trials. So I did promise the guys I would make a short advertisement for the IoT Alliance. So if you'd like to join, it's free, it's great to be part of, and the URL is simply iot.org.au. And I guess what I wanted to just conclude in saying is that this IoT thing may be a gold rush further down the track. I can assure you that so far it's not proven a ghost train that you ought to be frightened of. What it really is at this stage is a wonderful greenhouse, and the Alliance is one particular greenhouse that you can be part of, in which we need to grow a new industry, learn about the various use cases we can put IoT to, and those of you out there from a customer or partner perspective who'd like to play in that greenhouse with us, we'd be most welcome to have you join. Thank you.